Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. Um, I'm very happy for this opportunity that I got in the time that I stayed in Portugal last year as a visiting professor, and I'm here to try to present you some a little of my knowledge about anti-racist education. There are projects that I've been working for some years, and Professor Maria de Fátima Pacheco already presented me. So I just have to resume that I've been working with teacher training and teacher formation since 2007. So I have almost 20 years trying to help people in education, and in the last years, I have been focused in anti-racist education because um, I believe that the education starts, and any kind of education, and even anti-racist education starts um, since we are children. So I think it's, how can I say, it would be a solution for combat racism, starting it for the teacher education. So Maria de Fátima Pacheco has already introduced me, so I don't need to say anything else that I had prepared for it. And I would like to, first of all, to contextualization of the importance of racist education. Um, in Brazil, especially in Brazil, I'm saying about our reality, but some people, some people know, but many people, or most of people, think we don't have racism anymore. But unfortunately, it's not true. Uh, so we have to look at racism and the combat to against fight against racism very strongly, because we still have a lot of racism in our society. I say especially in Brazil because I'm Brazilian, but I know that it's a problem of the world. So it's very important we take this subject to education, because we can't deal with just like pointed subject in some isolated subject, but how can I say, a society formation. When we say when we talk about anti-racist education, we are saying about combat structural racism, promoting racial equity, and values cultural diversity. Because we can notice in our society, we don't have these values in many of the situations, mainly in education. And the importance of the anti-racist education lies in developing critical citizens who question prejudice and help build a fairer, more inclusive society, ensuring equal opportunities and respect for human rights. So it's not just a subject that we can treat like isolated, and we can discuss just in November and the Black Consciousness Month, and in isolated events. But we have to talk about it, and we have to discuss and to reflect about the subject all along the year, all along the semester, and because of it, I believe that we have to take it to teacher formation, because when we teach teachers to deal with it, we can multiply these actions. Because, for example, now I'm a professor and I teach teachers. I work with teacher formation. So, for example, today I have a classroom with 40 future teachers or 40 future professors. And when I finish my work with these professors, with these future professors, these future teachers, I will multiply 40 plus 40. So every teacher I can help with this kind of practice, I multiply it about 30 or 40 times more. Because of which I think the education, since the formation teacher formation is very profitable. So the main objectives of this lecture is, first of all, to discuss teacher training or teacher formation and anti-racist educational practice. So when we say teacher training, I don't know if I used the right word, but I said training and not formation, because I think this practice goes on during all the formation. It's not just, how can I say, a certificate or something like that, but a practice that must be trained all the time. So we are gonna try to discuss it during this 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and some practice that can collaborate with this practice. And and I'm gonna bring it to this lecture some anti-racist education practice that I developed in Brazil, like as a teacher, in teacher training, as my work has been presenting this kind of practice. So I'm going to tell you some projects that I've worked here in Brazil, and I also tried to take a little bit of it to Portugal when I was in Bragança as a business professor, and it was an amazing experience. And this is the structure of this lecture. In the first part, we're gonna speak a little bit about fundamental concepts, including anti-racist education and the racism and the law that we have in Brazil. In the second part of the lecture, we are gonna talk a little bit about the teacher training or teacher formation, the challenges and maybe some good practice. And in the part 3, I'm going to tell you about the anti-racist educational practice that I've been working in Brazil in my job during the time that I've been a teacher, a professional. And finally, the conclusion and some suggested resource that I can disseminate and help with some didactic materials and something like that. First of all, I guess it's very important we speak about racism and its manifestations, because as I told you, some people or many people or more or better, most of people think, at least in Brazil, think we don't have racism anymore because we don't have slavery anymore. So racism is some legend or something like that. But unfortunately, we have it in our society and it's very strong. And racism is not just an isolated phenomenon or ideology, but it has a lot of many manifestations. And then I brought you 3 of them, and saying that racism is an ideology that devalues groups based on racial characteristics, sustaining social inequalities. So when we have it, we have exclusion, we have structural inequalities. We don't have peace in our society, we don't have equality, so we don't have a genuine society at all. And the first manifestation of racism that I brought you is the institutional racism. What is institutional racism? It is kind of manifestation. It's practices where practices and policies, institutions perpetuate discrimination. So we have institutions, participation of this kind of action and perpetuating it in society. So it's unfortunately it happens a lot in many societies, in many situations, and many times we don't know how to deal with it. We can't combat with it because we don't have knowledge sometimes about it to try solve this problem. A second manifestation of racism is the interpersonal racism through individual acts of prejudice and discrimination. So when we see a person saying bad things, bad words to another person because of his or her color, because of his race, and or something like that, that so we have a lot of actions in Brazil, a lot of facts, a lot of happenings about interpersonal racism. And we, of course, we have punishment for it, but it's not all the time this punishment is applied. And a third manifestation of racism is the internalized racism that, in my opinion, is the worst one because in this internalized racism, marginalized individuals internalize racist beliefs, or rather, it's believed that racism is the best ideology, is the best situation, is the best action, and affect their self-esteem and identity, or rather, Black people or people that consider they suffer the racism, they think, well, I'm a Black person, so I deserve, don't have a good treatment because this is the society, this is the ideology, the world works like this. So I guess, in my opinion, is the worst one. And all of this, institutional racism, interpersonal or internalized racism, just brings exclusion and structural inequalities that is not good for any society. And in the part one, still in fundamental concepts, we have the concept of anti-racist education, principles and objectives. So until so far, we had talked about racism and some concepts, and now we are gonna bring this for education, to education, and how can we deal with it in education as teachers, or as professors, as students, and as community, and as society, because we can't just leave this responsibility just to school, just to education, just to professors, and so on. We can deal with it, we can look at it as a society, as people, as a civilization. So, what is the, how can I say, the advantage, let's say, advantage of anti-racist education? It promotes racial equality through the appreciation of the diversity and the fight against prejudice. But why? Why we are saying that anti-racist education and not anti-racist actions, for example, or anti-racist behavior or something like that? Because everything in our life, in our civilization, starts in education. We can communicate, we can read and write because we have the education. We have our communication, our natural communication, but it's through education we can have most of the knowledge that are necessary for our survival, for our life in society. So when we have the anti-racism in education, we have consequently this kind of action since the civilization, since the society formation. And the principles, which among the principles include respect for difference and social justice, with the goal of developing critical citizens, building an inclusive and equitable society. So the respect, the diversity, the social justice are some of the main principles of anti-racist education. However, some, I don't know, not some, but most of people, most of teachers and professors still don't know how to apply it in classroom. Because we're going to say a little about legislation, we're going to say about the law that demands it in Brazil. But we have a law since 2003, and so far, many teachers and professors don't know that this law exists, and don't know how to apply this law when the teacher discovers about it. So it's a very problem, because we don't, it's not workful. We have a law and we don't know how to apply, and we don't know we don't know why it exists. The law I was speaking about is the law number 10,639 from 2003, and it has a very important, it's very important for the inclusion of Afro-Brazilian history and culture. But not just it. It's because when we say that this law helps us with anti-racist education, it's because it's not because of the Afro-Brazilian history and culture, but because it's through this knowledge, we also understand why racism is still present in our it's still present in our society, it's still present in our civilization, and try to reflect why how healthy is it in our society, why can't we combat, why can't we fight against this kind of actions. So it's not just a law, but how can I say, it's a way to try to understand and to reflect why we still have racism in our society. And this law, what this law demands, mandates the inclusion of Afro-Brazilian history and culture in the school curriculum, promote the recognition of Black identity, and combating racism. So we have, for example, we have the law, but we don't have how to apply the law. So that's a problem we try to solve when we try to get some strategies. We have the law 10639 from 2003, but how can I apply this law? What kind of knowledge? How can I know why this law exists in Brazil? Why we need a law to try to understand this kind of ideology. Another fact of this law that it's essential for broadening the acknowledgement of Afro-descendant contributions to Brazilian society and fostering racial equity. So it's not just to say about racism and to fight against, but to understand what are the contributions, what are the collaborations we had from people, from Afro-descendant people, what we have of good things besides the racism. So this law helps us to understand and to bring to education. Hello? I listen to a sound. Is everything okay?
Everything okay, Eva?
Okay. And a comment that I have put in these lectures is that unfortunately, in Brazil, the prevalence of racism necessitates a law to mitigate its impacts, through it's not always fully enforced. So, in my opinion, why do we have to need a law for something that would be natural? It would be natural to valorize, sorry, I had to close a window here. In my opinion, it would be natural to valorize the Afro-Brazilian history, the culture, the diversity, the equity, and something like that. And we need a law. For example, when I was in Bragança, in Portugal, as a visit professor last year, when I told about this law to my students, that I tried to take a little of our culture, a little of our studies in Brazil, a little of my research, and when I said about this law, some students got a little surprised because they couldn't understand why do you need a law to say about racism. Why do you need a law? Why do you need some laws to try to valorize your culture, your race, and something like that? And I also think like that. And now we start our second part of our lecture. And in the second part, we speak about teacher training, and we start with some challenges in teacher training for anti-racist education. So it's not easy to work on teacher training for anti-racist education because we still have a lot of prejudice, and we have difficulty to find materials that keep weak and isolated events, but we don't have something that brings. So you need to work during all the formation, and you have this kind of methodology, and you have already. We don't have facilities. We still don't have facilities in this work. Yeah, of course, we have almost 2003, 13, almost 22 years that the law uh, uh, then the law that mandates this kind of study is in our country, but we still don't have some orientations or instructions for it. And one of the challenges includes overcoming structural prejudice. It's very difficult to overcome, expanding knowledge of culture and racial diversity, and developing inclusive, critical, pedagogical practices. So, for example, one of the practices that I worked here in Brazil, one of the activities was uh, to to put the name of the main authors that wrote about Brazil culture and diversity. And the students couldn't say any Black author, just famous ones, but none of them were Black. So we don't valorize people that can suffer racism with this kind of action, for example. And another challenge is the importance of self-reflection and recognizing biases. So it's very difficult to, to have a self-reflection about this subject and to discuss about this with other people, because many people still think we don't have racism anymore, and it's not the matter of education. And I had, for example, a student that criticized a lot in one of the classes that I was uh, teaching about racism in Brazil, and he told me, "You are wrong because we don't have slavery in Brazil anymore, and we don't have racism, and it's a kind of a drama that you are making some drama. So it was very sad to try discuss it with some students and some people that don't recognize it, and the self-reflection and some strategies to deal with it is very important. And here I listed just some strategies that I use in my practice in the classroom. One of them is the inclusion of Afro-Brazilian history and culture content. And when we include this kind of books, texts, papers, we also understand all this process. We also understand or try deal with this kind of action. A second point of this strategy is a critical approach to ethnic racial relations. When we say about ethnic racial relations, it's not about just saying what you know about it, but to give a critical perspective about the subject and to know how to discuss about it. And how can we discuss about it if we don't have knowledge, if you don't have research, we don't have readings about this kind of subject. And a third point is the development of skills to handle discrimination situations. What is really difficult for us, at least for me in the classroom, I already had a very bad experience in classroom with discrimination situations, with discriminations between two students or between a student and a dad and a mom. Well, it was very difficult to deal with it. And when I how can I say, when I had this experience at the first time, I started to study about it. I started to research about it and to understand why and how it happened, and tried to help with my job, with my research, and with my practice. The first time I had to deal with this kind of situation was in school. I was about 12 years old. My sister was about 10. And I have my parents now. My father is black, my grandparents as well. And my sister was, how can I say, a classmate. My sister classmate told she was a monkey. You look like a monkey because you are black. And it happens at school when I was 12. So I started thinking about it since when I was a child, and when I got being a teacher and after a professor, I again suffered this kind of situation, but with a student of mine. A student of mine had suffered racism in the classroom in the teacher formation. So that's why it's very different. It's very difficult to develop this kind of skills because it's we get in shock when we are presented to kind of this situation. And now in this part, I also want to tell you about some practices in teacher training. While I'm, since I started to work with anti-racist education, I say good practice is not because they are my projects, but because they were projects that made the difference in the life of many students, professors, and teachers. And the first one was semiotic and Black consciousness. And in this project, I got the prize from Carlos Chagas Foundation, a very large institution in Brazil. And I stayed as a finalist in prize led education light from Rede Globo TV. I'm going to say you some details in the next slide, but I'm just listing some of the projects. Another project that I worked that was very successful was PBID and anti-racist education. I'm going to tell about it a little bit. And I also developed with a student a scientific initiation project. The student was a Black student that had suffered racism in the college. And teaching project using the discourse analysis. And when I was teaching, working with discourse analysis at teacher formation, I also applied a project that worked the anti-racist education. And so I'm going to tell you about a little bit about this prize, Semiotics and Black Consciousness. It was I got a prize from Carlos Chagas Foundation in 2023. This link is the article that I produced about, and I'm going to leave in the chat after I finish this lecture. And I got this prize because I developed a methodology that I worked in the teacher formation, the Black consciousness and the anti-racist education during all semester, not just on November in the Black consciousness week. But I developed a methodology that I started working with the law and the theories and the conceptions of the racism and the teacher formations and something like that, and everything of it integrated and articulated with anti-racist education. And I used semiotics for this articulation. So in this methodology, we start because it's now a practice that involves teacher, professor, and students. So we start studying the law that I have told you about, and then we study about the concepts of racism and the anti-racist education, and we articulate it to the knowledge we are speaking about in the formation. In this case, was the semiotics, and then after it, the students present some seminars, and in the seminars they bring the perspective how to work the semiotics knowledge to articulate to anti-racist education. And after all, they produce some didactic materials for other teachers and the other professors work in classrooms with the students. And all these materials are published by Federal Institute of São Paulo in Campus Avaré, where I'm working nowadays. And it's available for everybody who wants to work with anti-racist education. So, of course, more details about this methodology you can read in this publication. Unfortunately, it's in Portuguese, but we have, thanks God, we have a lot of strategies for translating to another language. And with the same methodology and some adaptations, I also stayed among the 5 finalists of the Prêmio led by Globo Television, and Globo had about 2,000 submissions, and I was 5 of the best ones. The prize was just for the first two professors, and I stayed uh, among the 5 ones. And of course, the priority was Black and people that had suffered racism. So you also can watch this presentation. It's about 10 minutes of the presentation. You can watch at Global Play. You don't need to pay for it. You just need to sign up, okay, to register, and you can watch in this link that I'm gonna leave in the chat after my presentation as well. And a little bit about PBED and anti-racist education. PBED is a program we have in Brazil that we have the initiation to teaching. So during the 2 first years, the students that are in teaching formation, they receive a scholarship to start working in schools, helping teachers and learning about the profession. And so we applied the anti-racist education at this program, and we took to various public schools in Avaré. It was very, a lot of people got very surprised. Teachers got surprised in the main the schools or else. We had a very successful result about this project. And in the second point, I also worked with a scientific initiation project with a student. I think I have told you in the beginning. Her name was Natalia, and I started this project with her when she told me that she felt very, how can I say, inferior person because she was Black and she had suffered a lot of prejudice and in school, and not just in school, elementary school or basic school, but also in college. So she told me she had suffered it from a teacher, another professor, and I got in shock. So I started this project with her. After this project, she got a very successful woman. She traveled abroad, started to work in another country, got a very better self-esteem. So it was very worthful in my professional life. I got very proud of this project, not because of the project or the research, but because of the good things I reflected in her life. And finally, just to tell about some, I worked with a teaching project when I was teaching discourse analysis. I think it was in 2023, before going to Portugal as a visiting professor. When I was teaching discourse analysis, I articulated it at the anti-racist education. So I tried to adapt the semiotic teaching to discourse analysis teaching and articulate it to anti-racist education. And I also, in this project, discussed about the law, the theory, and the articulation about articulation with the Black consciousness, and the dedicated material production for students, for students, for teachers, and be published in the site of the Federal Institute. So all the students now have the productions, the publications about this project, and the most important, the knowledge about the articulation of the formation and the articulation with the anti-racist education. Of course, I just gave you some a resume of these projects. If you want more information, if you would like to see some production about, of course, you can write me in this email. And now, in our last part, we have some strategies for anti-racist education in the classroom. As I told you in the beginning, the inclusion of Black authors, it's very difficult. We face it with some frequency in our reality. We don't have this inclusion, so it's worthwhile we research about and include it in our practice. The discussion of topics such as racism, identity, and diversity, to appropriate about knowledge of these topics and to discuss it with our students, our classmates, our colleagues, and in our professional life, in our society. And another strategy, the use of inclusive teaching resource, books that value Black culture, films about racial diversity, anti-racist educational games, Afro-Brazilian music, and activities promoting critical debates on equality and respect. In the end of this lecture, I have some suggestions and some materials that I'm gonna indicate to you. And of course, we have the importance of student community participation. When we have the participation of students community, it strengthens anti-racist education by fostering dialogue, protagonism, and collaborative practices, broadening awareness and combat racism. So we can't just leave all the responsibility to professors, teachers, and students, but as a society. So we have to participate as anti-racist people as society, not just, that's education matter, teacher matter, professional matter. No, it's a work for all of us as civilization, as a society. In conclusion, I have a call to action, the commitment to anti-racist education. So we need to have this commitment as individuals, as civilization, as society, as people. And here I brought you some suggested additional resource for teachers and of course for professionals and who else would like to know about it. We have Dedicates of Anti-Racist Education from Catherine Quarles, Anti-Racist Education by Kobayashi, the Educational Science in Happily Ever After, an approach to racial relations. That's a book I wrote in 2021 with my friend Tani Scoparo, and we analyzed the film Happily Ever After. We use the semiotics for each, and we bring some practices to work and to study the anti-racist education. That's it's for free for download. If you put the name in Portuguese at Google, you can get the book for free. You don't need to pay for it. Okay. And now you also have some websites like MEC Portal, UNESCO, Racial Education Observatory, and some articles like the Anti-Racist Education in Brazil and Semiotics, Teaching and Black Consciousness, a Film Analysis. This last one, it was me and my friend Tânia Scoparo who wrote, and it's published at Revista Brasileira de Educação. Of course, all of these books and articles are in Portuguese. Some of them still have the English version, but what are in Portuguese you can easily translate with some strategies we already have. And finally, to conclude this lecture, in this lecture highlights the importance of anti-racist education in promoting racial equity and citizenship formation. It addresses racism in its various manifestations. Law number 639 from 2003, and challenges in teacher training such as overcome biases and adopting inclusive practices. Strategies such as including Afro-Brazilian content, using inclusive teaching resource, and involving students and the community are emphasized to strengthen the fight against racism. So to finalize, to finish my speaking, I'd like to just to reinforce that we can't just speak about this Black consciousness and the anti-racist just in November, actually Black Conscious Week, but all the time. And I finished with the phrase that shocked a lot of people with some episode of racism. That is the phrase Black Lives Matter. And here I have some reference of this lecture. Of course, it's not all of them, but the main ones. And very with my heart, I really thank you so much for listening to me, for being here, and let me try to disseminate a little of my knowledge about this so fundamental and important thing. Thank you.